Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So glad to see you this afternoon at this on this rainy day. Of course, it seems like we always have rainy days now in Athens. So I'm not really going to celebrate that too much because I would rather celebrate a sunny day at this point. I'm going to start, I'm going to go off book right away because although all of our students' presentations are primarily about water, Janisse is presenting on Pollinator. So I'm going to dive right out there and see if I can't come up. I'm a beekeeper, and if you know bees at all, you know that bees are very social, and they are also wonderfully movable. They're probably the least domestic of domesticated industries we have, so that any hive of bees will travel 2 to 3 miles to gather pollen and nectar. It really is in that way wonderfully similar to watersheds, because every bit of honey that you've ever eaten is, you might say, this 3-mile community of plants all around you. So everything that all of your neighbors are doing in agriculture or industry or even in the backyard barbecue is somehow shared through that source of honey, just as our water systems are. So that was my quick anecdote. Anyway, I'm Ron Balthazar, and I teach composition and environmental literature in the English department, and I'm on the committee for the integration of sustainability across the curriculum here at UGA. People here often ask me, imagining that sustainability is more at home in ecology or forestry, ask me how I got involved in sustainability. Sustainability, as you probably know, is often defined as the investigation of the deep interconnections between biology, economics, and culture with a particular eye towards the future. Well, in the English department, we call that a novel. Got it? Thank you. I am honored today to introduce one of our state's great storytellers of sustainability, a myth maker of the southern longleaf pine forest and of the great Alatamaha watershed, Janisse Ray. In a wonderful confluence, pun intended, we here at UGA share the same watershed as Janisse, and though we are upstream physically, we are certainly downstream in imagining the significance of the great Alatamaha watershed. Some 8 years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to teach a first-year student in composition. 2 years later, she invited me to coffee to talk about a student initiative to self-impose a fee for an Office of Sustainability here on campus. As you know, that referendum was passed with, I think, the highest level of support by students of anything ever. And President Adams went on at that point to create the Office of Sustainability in the spring of 2010. This student was one of the first interns at the Office of Sustainability, and she's gone on to work on sustainable food systems out in Arkansas and is back now in graduate school in ag economics and continues to advocate for healthy food for everyone. I offer this anecdote to highlight the fact that students have often, almost always, been at the heart of sustainability efforts here on this campus from the very beginning, and remain in many ways the driving force behind so many great sustainability ideas here. You're going to get to see 4 of them today. Thus, I was thrilled, though not surprised, that Janisse wanted to focus on sustainability work of our students. Within the larger sustainability theme, you will note one of our focus on water. This fall, we are in the midst of the Watershed UGA project, an initiative to involve UGA Campus and community in restoring our streams and helping us all think more about our watersheds. Through the work of students, faculty, and the Athens community, we hope to transform our watersheds on campus into living laboratories through teaching, research, and service. If you'd like to find out more, I shouldn't say, go to www.watershed.uga.edu. If I may, I'd like to quote Janisse in conclusion as a final introduction for our panel today. This is from Drifting into Darien. The world is full of lively, flowing, storied rivers asking nothing, intent on their missions, rivers both merciless and merciful. But the Alatamaha is mine, as the Alatamaha is all of ours. Its water, my blood, its history, my own. I was born of it. Every drop of water I have drunk in my sojourns along it comes from it and returns to it. Thus the river informs me as I inform it. That's why we're here today, to be informed a little bit more about how we share in sustainability through our water and through our pollinators this afternoon. And with that, I'd like to welcome Lauren Mullenbeck to the podium. Thanks, Lauren.
I'm not sure how to get to my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I know you are all, I'm sure, wanting to be elsewhere in a more sunny place, but thank you. I especially want to thank Janisse Ray for not just writing beautiful works that we can all enjoy, but also for working so hard to protect the places in Georgia that we all love so very much. So I am here today to talk to you about an initiative on campus called Watershed UGA, and we are trying to restore our campus watersheds using a collaborative team of UGA faculty, students, and staff. And my main part in Watershed UGA has been engaging UGA classes in this stream restoration, so I'll be talking a little bit in more detail about that for you today. But first, I just want to do a quick poll. How many of you before today were aware that there are creeks that run through campus? Okay, so this is a more aware audience than most. Does anyone want to tell me the name of one of those streams? Tanyard. What about the other one? Lily Branch. Very good, okay. So we asked that question more or less the same way using a survey this past summer to the general Athens community, and we found that in general awareness is much lower than in this room currently. And that awareness could be for several reasons. Primarily, a large portion of these streams that run through campus are piped underground, and they flow beneath our parking lots, our buildings, and even our football stadium, it turns out. And they are polluted by stormwater runoff and fecal coliform, and the banks are overgrown by invasive plants. So that is why we have come together as a team of UGA faculty, students, and staff to have Watershed UGA, and we are trying to restore it. So our watersheds could be telling the history of campus and of Athens. They can be a fabulous learning tool or a place to relax and recreate, and currently they are out of sight, out of mind. So that is primarily what Watershed UGA is trying to do. We are doing that through a variety of ways. We have engagement with UGA classes. We have K-12 outreach. We have housing and Greek life on campus outreach, and a variety of service opportunities and events for other Athens community members. And Mary, after me, is going to talk a little bit more about the K-12 outreach with the Chew Crew, the goats that eat the invasive plants. With UGA classes, they have the opportunity to learn about the fundamentals of watersheds, the history of our watersheds, how humans might impact them, and how invasive plants will impact them. And through our K-12 outreach, Athens-Clarke County students can learn more about the stream that runs behind their elementary school, or they can come play with goats and learn about invasive plants. Through our housing and our Greek life outreach, we are getting those large student organizations to come rally around cleaning our streams and producing that community around restoring them. And we have, through service events, UGA students and Athens community members can learn the power of using community to restore something to its full potential that it once had. And my part in Watershed UGA was to engage the UGA classes. So we did that by developing learning modules, which are basically lesson plans that can be incorporated by UGA instructors into one or more class periods in their semester. And we have developed 4 of them so far. They were a teaching as research project this past spring, and a handful of UGA graduate students received mini grants to apply pedagogical tools in order to implement these modules. I was fortunate enough to be one of those graduate students this past spring, and I helped develop a module on the human impacts to rivers and streams. And what we've tried to do with these modules is incorporate several things. We have lecture material in the form of a narrated PowerPoint, and that is really great for the flipped classroom style of learning, where students can view the PowerPoint beforehand and then come to class prepared to engage in interactive activities. Each module also has a learning objective, sometimes several, to guide these interactive activities. We've developed assessments so we can make sure that these learning modules are producing the learning outcomes that we desire from our students and keeping them nice and engaged. And we have optional service events, labs, field trips, and other opportunities for civic engagement. And each of these modules is available on a publicly available website, watershed.uga.edu. I encourage you all to check it out. This is a quick screenshot of the homepage as it is right now, but it is very continually updated. So UGA instructors, if they want to incorporate one of these modules into their classes, will come up here to the modules tab and they can download all of the materials for an entire class period or more, or they can just choose from the individual learning objectives. Say they want to learn more about specifically what are the two main things that are polluting our water, or what are invasive plants doing, so they can go to the objectives and download a few materials there, or just an activity. And then underneath our map section, we have these really great sustainability walking tours of North, South, and East Campus. And students will walk down them and stop and learn about various sustainability features. And pretty soon we will also have watershed walks, which will follow the path of the stream and learn about sustainability features that way. And then UGA students and Athens community members can come to the events and service page and learn about ways to do privet pulls and other service events regarding stream restoration. And we have about 25 to 30 UGA instructors incorporating Watershed UGA into their classes this fall, with a handful, maybe 10 or 15, also doing it in the spring. So if you teach a class at UGA, we would love to talk to you more about how you can incorporate Watershed UGA into your class in the spring. And it will be really cool to see all of that assessment data after you all incorporate those modules. And that's about all I have. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Howard. I am a third-year environmental engineering student here at UGA, and I am also one of the watershed interns in the Office of Sustainability, working with the CHU crew this fall. So what is the CHU crew? It's a student-led research initiative investigating the potential and benefits of prescribed goat grazing here on campus. Our herd is comprised of about 12 to 15 goats that we hire once a semester to chew up the invasive species at two sites, Tanyard Creek and Driftmeyer Woods, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Many goals, many initiatives, but broadly speaking, we aim to restore the health and natural and ecological balance of our remaining natural spaces on campus and to exist as a living laboratory for students and faculty to use in both class studies and research. How does it work? Well, goats are infamous for eating everything and anything, right? So we put that talent to our benefit. We allow them to openly graze these sites, and they'll eat the foliage off of everything they can reach, native and invasive. So to combat that, we then go back after grazing and sow the seeds of the native species we'd like to see flourish and return to the site. And over the course of many seasons of grazing and seeding, hopefully we'll see more and more native species and less invasive species. So our first site, Tanyard Creek, is our oldest site. It's in its fourth year of grazing. It's actually down the street next to the whole street parking deck if you'd like to check it out after this. This map is showing you the watershed of Tanyard Creek outlined in orange. So as you can see, it takes up most of, or all of North Campus and then a large portion of downtown Athens. Due to this large area, you can imagine trash, sediment, heavy metals, everything from Athens ends up flowing through Tanyard Creek into the center of campus underneath the stadium. I think this picture can say it better than I can. It's pretty gross. So we regularly host trash cleanup days where we pull trash and recycling from the stream. This semester, we've already pulled over 300 pounds of trash and recycling from Tanyard Creek, not including the large items we find, such as tires, pieces of toilets, and even a laptop. So the future of Tanyard Creek. One day, in combined efforts with Watershed UGA, we hope to see a clean, restored Tanyard Creek. Students could use this for recreation, studying outdoors. Teachers can use it for more Watershed UGA modules and the continued research and class studies that are happening right now. The CHU crew relies almost completely on volunteer effort. So because of this, we have a variety of events and volunteer work days throughout the year suitable for nature lovers of all ages. Some of the regular activities we do at Tanyard Creek include trash removal, like I said, vegetative trimming, invasive pulling, and of course, petting goats. So where are we going from here? In combined efforts with the College of Environment Design, College of Engineering, Office of Sustainability staff, and several student organizations, we were awarded a $25,000 grant from Ford Motor Company for the second year in a row to expand into Driftmeyer Woods, which is a forgotten patch of old-growth Piedmont forest estimated to be at least 100 years old, down on South Campus next to the Driftmeyer Engineering Center. So we're currently in the process of building that site. We're finishing construction of the electric fence, the exclosure, and hanging gates, and it should be ready for goats in the spring. Another aspect of last year's 2015 Ford grant was the Junior Hurdle, which is a program that's been established with Barrel Elementary. It's run by a UGA Office of Sustainability intern, and it gives these elementary students the unique opportunity to explore the natural landscapes, learn about environmental problems, and interact with university-level students, hopefully instilling in them a desire to strive for higher education. This semester, they're working on a project where they're designing a gate for the Driftmeyer site, which 2 landscape architecture classes are also participating in. And later this semester, we'll have a design review where they get to mingle and share ideas. We're really excited about it. Like I said, we rely completely on volunteer efforts. So if you'd like to get involved, like us on Facebook. And if you'd like to be added to our listserv, you're more than welcome to come talk to me afterwards. And if you'd like to see some cool photos, we're also on Instagram. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much.
Hi there. My name is Shannon Bonney, and I'm a 5th year student with the Integrative Conservation and Ecology program. And I'm here today to talk to you about a slightly larger watershed that is nearby. I am talking to you about a multi-year project I have completed with Lori Fowler and other students at departments at UGA and at institutions around the basin. I'll give you a little more details about it. So what this project is we are looking at the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint watershed, a bit bigger of a river basin. It covers from north of Atlanta all the way down to the coast with mixed uses. And if you guys have heard of it, you might have heard about a little bit of controversy in the area, which kind of stems around the fact that most of the water in the watershed is stored up at the very tippy top in Lake Lanier. You can see it's the lion's share of the storage in the entire watershed. And there's a whole bunch of state agencies, federal agencies, and just agencies with their hand in the pot trying to manage this river. But what's happened is there's these gaps and fragments where during really dry times, people just can't seem to get it right and figure out ways to share it properly. So there's a very long history of litigation, which you guys might have heard of. So where we come into play is a number of years back, Lori Fowler was approached by this organization called the ACF Stakeholders Incorporated. And what they are is they're a consensus-driven organization of people from around the watershed that are really the movers and shakers who can get things done as far as water management. The goal of this organization was to find a way to change the operation of this large and contested river basin to find equitable and viable solutions that balance economic, ecological, social values, i.e. we're looking to increase the sustainability of management of water in the basin. So we were in a really fortunate position in that we were able to work with a stakeholder group and there's 2 projects. One, the stakeholder group made a sustainable water management plan of the basin, which is available online at acfstakeholders.org. And then we, Lori Feller and myself, and students and faculty from around the watershed as a university collaborative, did a research project on what we were calling institutional options to manage the river. And this had 4 phases of research over the years. We did a literature review and structured interviews with different organizations around the world that are able to find ways to cooperate and manage water in interstate river basins. We did follow-up interviews figuring out how these organizations were formed. A lot of them were formed in areas that already had federal and state regulatory agencies, so how they were able to negotiate the balance of power within a watershed that already had a whole bunch of organizations at play. In phase 3, we looked back at the ACF basin and looked for gaps where we might suggest that there are opportunities for more sustainable management of the basin. And then this most recent phase, we worked with this group of stakeholders in a consensus-driven process to come up with a series of recommendations that we felt might more sustainably manage the river basin. We came up with 3 options for an organization that would be a quasi-governmental organization where essentially we'd have members of government and members of stakeholder group working together to come up with common solutions rather than focusing on the courtroom. The stakeholder group that we worked with decided to make a coordinating council underneath the auspices of the organization. And so currently, they have this incorporated into their plan and are working with federal and state agencies to get support. And the initial functions that were identified as being important to be undertaken by this new organization would be around coordination and collaboration rather than trying to replace existing institutions. And so where we're left at now is there's a lot of exciting opportunities for the academic community to get involved with the stakeholder community and trying to promote sustainable water management to state and regulatory agencies in the near future. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Okay, so I'm Emily Swift. I'm currently the Water Trails intern for UGA's Office of Sustainability, and I'm here to give you my talk on engaging in your watershed, the importance of water trails. So why water trails? Can anyone here off the top of their head think of something that can benefit community economically, ecologically, recreationally, while also contributing to health benefits, new educational opportunities, and the implementation of preservation and conservation practices? So this may sound all too good to be true, but if you could guess just by the title of my talk, you can see that I'm referring to water trails. But what is a water trail and how could they possibly provide so many benefits? Water trails are rivers or streams with established points, established points for boat put-ins and takeouts for people to use for their own recreational pleasure. They encourage people to get really involved in their community and the nature in their own backyards, which in turn makes people more prone to protecting these sources and keeping them cleaner and safer so that they can provide a place of recreation for people to enjoy with their family and friends. They can also bring in visitors and new businesses while also providing environmental education opportunities for people of all ages. So what is being done in Athens to create water trails along the Oconee River? So UON is the Upper Oconee Watershed Network, and they're basically in charge of all things watershed in the Athens area. And they're the overarching organization that is connected to the Oconee Rivers Water Trails program, which I work closely with. And they're a committee made up of several different community members, including commissioners, local business owners, professors, and just those who are interested in engaging in establishing water trails in Athens. So this group has really stuck to their mission and vision of promoting conservation, preservation, education, and restoration of the Oconee Rivers watershed via the marketing and development of these water trails. So over the past few years, their hard work has finally paid off, and they've established their first put-in point at Ben Burton Park for the use of boats for recreational purposes, and the logistics as to when the construction is going to begin and finish are still being in the works. But with this success, they are now searching for their second location to serve as the takeout point along the trail. So my role as the Water Trails intern for the Office of Sustainability is primarily to manage social media outreach to promote the river activities and events occurring in Athens. So feel free to follow Oconee Rivers Water Trails on Facebook or Instagram. But ultimately, besides that, my job is to work with Oconee Rivers Water Trails to create a website to promote the water trails and make it easier for people to become engaged and involved in things that are going on in the progress of the water trails. So that the website should be up sometime by the end of the semester, and will just be in progress all throughout for a while probably. So most importantly, So why is this important to me? Finally, to wrap things up, I just wanted to let you know why this project is so important to me. In addition to my major of environmental economics and my minor of ecology, I'm pursuing a certificate in water resources. So as a water trails intern, I thought this would be a great opportunity to really get myself involved in the water resource sector in Athens and just meet new people, see what it's really like to work in this. But most importantly, I've been able to meet a lot of really passionate people who are so just interested in what they're doing and everything going on with the water trails, and gain insight into all of the city and legal procedures that come along with such a large project that a lot of people probably don't even realize. So ultimately, I think the concept of water trails is really cool, and it's exciting to be part of something that can bring people so close with their community and benefit with bringing people together and having impacts in all aspects of the community in general. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. Is that right, you guys? That's not right. Where is it at the top?
Slideshow.
Slideshow. Okay. All right, from the beginning. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Ron, for your introduction of all of us, and thank you, Shannon, Emily, Mary, Lauren. Thank you very much. I was told that this would be lightning talks, and I would have 5 to 7 minutes to talk, and it was a really great challenge for me because I never do PowerPoints. I always want the attention on me, not on that. So I also realized in looking at their PowerPoints that I have a long way to go to ever be up to the technological abilities of these young women. So here we go. I knew that the theme was on water and sustainability, but I was thinking about something that's been bothering me just the past few days. And so I decided, I've never written about monarchs or bees or pollinators, but I am concerned about it, and I just decided to tackle it. I live in Tanyard County, Reedsville, Georgia, with my family. The county has about 19,000 people. We live 10 miles outside Reedsville. Reedsville has about 2,000 people. And we live on a beautiful farm in the middle of the woods. And when you think of rural landscapes, like the ones that surround me, you think of this one on the left. Rural landscapes are bucolic, romantic, wholesome, healthful in our eyes, as opposed to industrial landscapes, which we think of as toxic. But the question has increasingly come for me: is the rural really bucolic? Is it really wholesome? This is a crossroads near my home, and the field on the right is being grown. It has soybeans, GMO soybeans. You see the irrigation. It's sprayed with Roundup. In fact, at this corner, there are 4 fields. This one is cotton here on our left. And I remember we bought this place 6 years ago. The place on the left past the stop sign is now pecan trees. But it was an old farm with an old house that got torn down for these pecan trees. Pecans are really a lucrative crop right now. When I published ecology, a woman came up to me once and she said, "I feel as if I'm living in a conquered country," which in a way I am. The reason that I think fields are problematic is that they were once that. And then they were this, agrarian landscapes. I believe that there is a scale that goes from wild landscapes represented by wilderness through agrarian landscapes represented by a field, into industrial landscapes represented by a factory, all the way to post-industrial technological landscapes, which possibly are, who knows, big banks of internet computers run by robots. I don't know. Now we have this. This has been on my mind a lot lately because we actually in the rural are living in industrial landscapes. I believe that we all need to think about, like really pay attention to what we're seeing. That a clear cut is, a clear cut is a field. That a pine plantation is not a forest. And so mainly that's what my talk is about, and that is just coming to grips with what we're really seeing in the rural and in the world. So this brings me to monarchs and how monarchs are surviving on our landscapes. You all know that monarchs have been in a severe long-term decline. There was 1 billion of them east of the Mississippi in the year 96, 97. In winter of 2013, a lot of monarch scientists let us know that monarchs were collapsing. And they had plummeted to 6.7 hectares to a low of 0.67. 7 of 12 sites had butterflies at the overwintering site in Mexico. I forgot to tell y'all that. And the most famous one, the one that's always had the most, is El Rosario. And it barely had any at all. This is a graph of the decline of monarch butterflies to 2013. I mean, completely serious. Let's take a minute. You see the overwintering sites, some in South Florida, the coast of Baja and California. And then this in Michoacan here, this main spot in Mexico. So in the spring, they either fly across the Gulf or they come up the land, and as soon as they land, they begin to lay eggs on only milkweed plants. They actually are collecting nectar from all kinds of wildflowers. So they need not just milkweed, which we're planting, they need anything that's blooming. Then they lay successive eggs as they're moving north. They're moving north in generations. There's summer breeding grounds you see up in the upper Midwest, and then when they're migrating back through, they do the same in reverse. Brad Plummer that year wrote a story in the Washington Post. He said, reason number 1 is that we are destroying the trees at the overwintering sites. When I turned 40, Raven and I took a trip to Mexico. I will tell you that I quit flying 8 years ago because of the climate. So this was when we were still flying. There had been a severe winter storm in the fir forests, and the butterflies were 6 inches thick on the ground. And these are pictures that we took. I had to scan them in because they were from so many years ago. So severe weather was reason number 2 for the decline. I want to tell you that reason number 3 is the one that I think we all have to be concerned about, because this is what matters on so many levels to us. And this is Roundup. Roundup's active ingredient is a chemical known as glyphosate. We're finding out all kinds of things about glyphosate here, but the main thing you should know right now is here's the increased use. It was 1996 that we put GMOs on the market, and the first genetically modified crops that we were growing were Roundup Ready soybeans. Y'all know what that means. That means used to, if you planted soybeans, you would have to go in and you were a chemical farmer. You would spray your field, then you would plant the soybeans. Then you could not spray any broadleaf herbicides on the field because you would kill the soybeans. So these new soybeans, Roundup Ready, were genetically engineered to be able to withstand Roundup, meaning they were sort of wearing raincoats. This slide I only stuck in because it adds 2012, and you see another 50 million pounds of use of Roundup just in that year. Now here is a map, a really interesting map, and the darkest brown is 88 pounds of glyphosate in a square mile. So let's just look at Georgia. We are majoring in corn and soybeans in South Georgia, and we are falling in 21 to 88 range, or more than 88 in South Georgia. So I'm surrounded by glyphosate. If you put the increase of glyphosate slide next to the decline of monarchs, you see what we're doing. Let me see. I want you to go back. I'm going back to this slide just for a minute so that you can look at beyond the dotted line where the summer breeding grounds mostly are of the monarch. And then an artist named Paul Maroka put this slide together for Gary Nabhan's website called Make Way for Monarchs. It's a very, very interesting and very beautiful map. At the same time that this article in the Washington Post came out, Lincoln Brower, a very famous monarch scientist, he said this. I'm not going to read it to you. It's basically, if you want to see what's happening to monarch butterflies, you better look at the Midwest, at how we're growing our crops, more and more of them genetically modified, using more and more glyphosate. The same thing from Chip Taylor of University of Kansas's MonarchWatch. You don't have to read it. He says the exact same thing. He says the loss of pollinating creatures whose populations, bees, whose populations are also collapsing, can result in a loss of plant diversity across the continent. If we pull monarchs out of the system, we're really pulling the rug out from under a whole lot of species. And then Homer Ridges, Lincoln Brower, and Gary Nabhan wrote this letter to the presidents of the 3 North American countries and said exactly the same thing. And all you have to do is read this. The current chemical-intensive agriculture is threatening monarchs and unraveling the fabric of our ecosystems. So these are memes I found online. I figured out how to do all this cool stuff. This was in 2014. You probably heard the news on this. The World Health Organization said glyphosate is not a possible carcinogen. It's not maybe. It is a probable carcinogen. I did not make this next slide, and so, but this is also a meme. But all the research that I've been seeing from scientific literature and popular literature says these things. Not only, number 5, is it linked to autism, it's linked to Parkinson's, to dementia, Alzheimer's, to multiple sclerosis, to all kinds of autoimmune diseases. I'm right now reading Brain Maker by Dr. David Perlmutter. He also wrote the book you may remember called Grain Brain, and he believes that the link here is actually number 4, that we are destroying our gut bacteria when we eat genetically modified organisms. Okay, what can be done? Now if we think, I've had a long-standing argument with Bill McKibben, who is a good friend of mine, but a man whose life I could never reach. Bill is always talking about we need policy changes, and I'm always talking about we need personal choice changes. And so I realized that when you have a 97% decline of monarchs, we're going to have both, and probably policy changes are going to be the ones that can save our pollinators. So here are a few possibilities. I want to talk to you about the thing that I just saw a couple of weeks ago, which is breeding habitat. So the solutions that Gary Nabhan and others are suggesting are leave more roadside natives. You know, you've got a swath of 40 feet or 25 to 40 on sides of roads. Leave fence rows and hedgerows in agriculture. There is a new form of agriculture which is actually, you would plant about 10 rows of a crop and then you would leave a 4-foot swath of, for plants, whatever weeds and natives come in. Then getting large numbers of milkweeds into gardens. So in Georgia, we have monarchs across Georgia. If you go to their website, they have about 150 gardens so far listed. They have recently been working with state parks and putting pollinator gardens at most of our state parks. This is the garden that we put in at Gordonia, Alatamaha, which is our little state park located right smack in the middle of Reedsville. It's a very beautiful park, and Al Alford is our park superintendent, just a wonderful visionary man. And when he told me that we were putting in a pollinator garden, I was ecstatic. And when he said a flat of plants were coming. Well, when the flat arrived, I was actually there, and the flat was 12 4-inch plants, and my daughter could easily haul it up in her hands. So it's a 4-by-8 bed with 12 plants in it. We put one in at our little library. Another volunteer, Stephanie Packard Hughes, and I, working with Martha Joyner, put in this, and you cannot see it in this slide, but there's actually a bumblebee on those asters over there. So meanwhile, I live on a dirt road 10 miles out of town named Catherine T. Sanders Road. I walk this road with our dogs in the morning. I have learned that I am bored while walking, and so I take a book with me and I read aloud. Thoreau or Arundhati Roy or somebody. I've been reading Taylor Branch, reading aloud while walking along this roadway. The wildflowers begin to, they bloom all summer, but in the fall, this specific suite of wildflowers start to bloom, and they begin to attract all these things, which I've seen there, all of them, dozens of ruby-throated hummingbirds, all these moths, all these bees. It is literally a tangled bank. Our road is, that part of the road is probably a mile long. Then one day, so this road is on Georgia State Farm Prison land, and one day they brought a big tank of glyphosate and they napalmed our road. It was early October. There's no need to moan about it. It's happening all over the state of Georgia. This road drains to my creek, Slaughter Creek, which drains to the Alatamaha River about 2 miles away. So when I walked, when we spoke of our road, we called it Butterfly Alley or Pollinator Alley, and it became a dead zone. Meanwhile, over on Highway 147, about 4 miles from our house, a 1/2 mile strip of road was napalmed so that this field could get bigger. The farmers are being paid subsidies, and they have to get bigger at all costs. So this GMO field, which is spraying with glyphosate, now has killed an entire fence row of trees. Am I yelling? So what you have, and this is the exact slide that I wanted to talk to you, this is the only reason I did this PowerPoint. What you have is almost the very same day, we planted 12 plants at the state park. This farmer napalmed a 1/2 mile. I love they feed my soul. So I say all that as farmers. Raven and I, we don't grow for market really. We have a few sales points, but mainly we grow for ourselves. We have an old-time, diverse kind of farm. When you go back to this continuum and you realize that I would spend my life moving back in this direction, I realize I'm happiest somewhere in the agrarian area of farming. But 93 million acres of the southern coastal plains uplands were in longleaf pine. I was recently at a native plant conference in Alabama, and Bill Finch, who is a wonderful ecologist and nature writer, I had a conversation with him about milkweed and longleaf pine. So of all the milkweed species, which is there's something like 80, I might have the number wrong, 45 of them are found in longleaf, 15 only in longleaf. And if you go back to the map that we saw, the minute that the monarchs who have been overwintering, the minute they reach the coastal plains of Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, where our longleaf meadows used to be, they begin to feed. And also, when they're returning, they're trying to put fat on themselves, and they are doing this by eating nectar. So they are actually feeding on all those plants that were along my roadway as they prepare for their journey back to Michoacan. Believe it or not, the decline of longleaf has been 97% over the course of history. So I believe, I believe that we should put in pollinator gardens in state parks, at our public libraries, at our schools. But I am just here to remind us what the true pollinator gardens are. And so to leave you in a more hopeful place, there's, I believe, I've spent a lifetime talking about longleaf and restoration of ecosystems. The Seed Underground book is about sustainable agriculture and how we might not be killing ourselves with what we eat. What you can do personally is eat organic food, get to know your organic farmers, don't consume GMOs, work to ban and label GMOs. And that, a true pollinator garden. One last slide. Okay.
Again, many thanks for being here today. Thank you so much. My bees, thank you. Our watersheds, thank you. What a great inspiration. Thank you all students so much. Leandra, do you have any last words?
No, thank you all for coming.
All right, have a good afternoon.